I'm in management mode, and my goal is to try and get the car to the top, and I'm trying to drive it pretty gently and pretty quickly. So now instead of a 1,000 horsepower car, I'm driving it like it's a 400 horsepower car. So I'm trying to use the throttle less and trying to carry my momentum more. Hey there, I'm Paul Gerrard, and on this episode of Mastering the Mountain, we're going to take a look at my 2017 run. Now, I've been doing a lot of racing for many, many years, about 30 years now, and have kind of been through Formula cars in Europe and working my way through all sorts of sports cars. Pikes Peak remains a huge, huge passion of mine, and it's something that's near and dear to my heart. And being a Colorado resident was always something that was incredibly important to me and something I really, really wanted to put on my racing resume. And my resume's got lots of interesting stuff. I was the Stig on Top Gear for 8 years. I've worked on the Grand Tour and all sorts of other television shows relating to Top Gear. And all these fun things that I've been able to do in cars, I've always imagined Pikes Peak as being right at the very top of the amazing things to do in a race car. And indeed, that's the case. And for 2017, I was driving a brand new car called the NV8. And this car was new to me. It was basically a car that had sort of evolved on the mountain a little bit with a gentleman by the name of Cody Loveland at LoveFab and another guy named Eric Streeter, who is the race engineer for the car, and then a little bit of help on aerodynamics from Sauber, the Formula One team, and a couple of guys that work there, Manuel and Seb, both helping with chassis work and also body work on the car. So it was this really interesting car where it was a true Pikes Peak special, something that was built specifically for paved Pikes Peak. And that's very different than dirt Pikes Peak, and it's also very different than a paved racetrack. And it's sort of an understanding of that created this car, a true modern Pikes Peak special. So it has all of the aerodynamics and downforce of a Le Mans prototype or a Formula One car, but it has longer wheel travel that helps it kind of cope with the frost heave bumps that inevitably are on the upper section of Pikes Peak and a few other bumps that are kind of distributed along the way. So it was this sort of a kind of this crazy dream team of guys that we had put together as fabrication, as engineering, and as even prototyping and wind tunnel work and all of these things that led us to this car called the NV8. And the NV8 was powered by a twin turbo LS V8, made lots and lots of horsepower, anywhere 800 to 1,000 horsepower that car made. And so, we'd been through all the trials and tribulations of a brand new race car with great RPS carbon brakes on it. Carbon brakes, something people don't usually use on the mountain, but these RPS carbons were built specifically to heat up very quickly, and therefore they gave us the bite that we needed right away, but saved an immense amount of weight. And then the mid-engine twin turbo LS, and then the aerodynamics of the huge tunnels in the back of the car that gave us somewhere in the neighborhood of about 5,000 pounds of downforce at 150 miles an hour. So all sorts of cool stuff. And the preparation for the run in 17 was really one that was not easy because it was a new car with all these new systems. Kind of had everything happen. I had stuck throttle, I had fires, I had engine issues, I had a push rod failure, all these things in the weeks leading up to the car. And that's all kind of normal. And the team worked through it all amazingly, and we just kind of kept on going and show up on the mountain through practice, getting the car through and doing just sleepless nights, putting everything back together. And again, this is not something that's unique to me in my Pikes Peak experience in 2017. That's the normal part of what makes this event such a marathon and such an odyssey and such an adventure. It's really unlike anything. It's not, you see an 8, hopefully, to 10 or 11 minute run up that mountain, you're like, boy, that's a lot of, it's a very short event, but you see the work that goes into the lead up to being able to successfully pull off that run up the mountain. It's countless hours by many, many individuals, and in our case, on different continents, kind of all pitching in and trying to get this crazy car, running and tested and proven so that it was ready to do the run. And so through that week of practice and qualifying, we actually qualified pretty well with the car, which gave us a good starting position, which actually would turn out to be pretty important because of kind of the looming weather that tends to roll in around noon or so, noon to 1 typically on a Pikes Peak race day. So all those things are factors, and I can't say enough great things about the team. And we all bonded because it was, again, a new team at that point, and now we're all best friends. And as you can see me with my Pikes Peak NV8 swag on, we're ready to bring the NV8 back in version 2.0, and I'm really looking forward to getting behind the wheel of that car again. It's an overall car. It goes for the overall record, and there's nothing more exciting than putting that in your crosshairs. There's nothing cooler. So enough about talking about the preamble of what it took to get the car to Pikes Peak and get it ready for the run. Let's start the run, because it was interesting. It didn't go as smoothly as I had hoped, but we got to the top, and that was the important thing. So let's see how it all kind of played out. All right, so start line, always exciting. You got all the people there, and away the car goes. And the first corner, you're really feeling out grip. And as I was accelerating through the first corner, I felt the car kind of step out and go sideways. And it made me think, okay, we put a little bit too much heat into our tires with our tire warmers. So I actually had to kind of back it down a notch in the beginning. And here you're talking about 120 to 140 mile an hour S's in the beginning. You're kind of punching up to nearly 140, slowing down to 120. And there's just a beautiful rhythm through these opening corners. I really love the lower section. It is like a racetrack, the lower section. It's relatively smooth. The only difference being, of course, you always have to remember at Pikes Peak, you don't have the runoff, so you can't make mistakes here. You've got to keep the car on the pavement and keep driving it. So again, I'm driving the car, and it's slightly oversteery through this whole section, which kind of caught me a little bit by surprise, because the car had never really done that throughout the practice sessions and the driving I had done. So I kind of took off my corner entry speeds just a tick and was laying in the throttle a little bit slower, a little bit smoother, and just trying to be really smooth with the car. And coming up, in the first couple of areas, I've already done a couple of light little left foot dabs with the carbon brakes to get them up to temperature. And as soon as I feel them bite, then I know it's okay to kind of, use the brakes. Now I can wait and brake at my normal late braking areas, and I'm going to have that bite. So you got all that downforce combined with carbon brakes, and we were seeing braking moments where we were well over 3 Gs of braking with the car in the hard braking zones. That's something I want to continue to do and continue to beat, kind of beat that record and keep going more and more. And now we're heading to the picnic grounds, and this is where it got interesting, because first of all, we set the highest speed that year through the picnic grounds, which is amazing. The bad thing is I actually lifted the cylinder heads off the block slightly, and basically that was the end of us going for any sort of record that run. And when that happens, you shoot the coolant out. And I actually felt coolant come through a little tiny pinhole in the firewall, and it actually ran down the back of my neck. And it's not coolant, by the way, it's just water. But it ran down there, and I'm like, okay, that's not good, and so I keep on going. And sure enough, the next thing I would see in like 3 or 4 corners where we're at right now is I saw an oil temp alarm come up where my oil temperature was above, I believe it was right around 240 degrees or 50 degrees that my oil temp alarm was set for. My water temp set a little bit lower. It didn't go off, hadn't gone off yet. And then just after that, then I saw the oil temp, not only the oil temp, but also the water temp. So now I'm in management mode, and my goal is to try and get the car to the top, and I'm trying to drive it pretty gently and pretty quickly. So now instead of a 1,000 horsepower car, I'm driving it like it's a 400 horsepower car. So I'm trying to use the throttle less and trying to carry my momentum more and carry speed through the corners. So I'm still able to attack the brake zones, that's all good, but now every time I would stay at full throttle for really any length of time, I'd see those temperatures spike back up again. And of course, if they get high enough, those oil temps get high enough, what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of them. We're just going through Ski Area right now, which is pretty fun, heading through there, and now coming into Rookie's Corner. So all this area is just so fun and flowing. I just adore driving up through this section. But now I've got that kind of double concentration going, where I'm thinking about a bunch of alarms that are going off on my dashboard and still trying to drive and shift. This is a manual gearbox car, 3-pedal car it was at this point. So I've got a clutch pedal I got to use on every shift, so I'm shifting the car with a regular H pattern and staring at these alarms and watching this road all at the same time. So it was a pretty task-intensive drive, and really what I'm doing is I don't want the car to I don't want the engine to explode, obviously, because that's going to put oil on the track. That's going to hurt everyone that's coming behind me. I don't want to be a red flag. But I'm thinking about the sleepless nights and nights that we've had in a row. And for the team, I'm like, I got to get this car to the top. And so I'm just focusing on just keeping the car going, trying to manage the temps. And what I found was I could get them to go up and down. And now I'm going through Glen Cove, and again, full throttle run. You watch the temperatures climb, and then whoa, back down again. Let's get those temps to come back down again a little bit. So I've taken this twin turbo LS and I've turned it into really an oil-cooled engine, because our water is quickly just being sprayed out and evaporating, and that means that there's none really left to cool the motor. So I just keep going though, because I see the temps continually sort of ratcheting up, but the car keeps on going. So I'm focusing, and other things that I'm doing as I'm climbing up towards the W's now is I'm trying to get the car up to speed relatively quickly, but not using full throttle, using about half throttle, get it up to speed, and then just maintain the speed as far as I can into the brake zone as far as I can, and then jam on the brakes as late as I can, just to minimize the time loss that I'm feeling by not being able to go to full throttle, not having all that horsepower at my disposal. So it was just this management. I go through Ragged Edge, one of my favorite corners, by the way, through Ragged Edge, and here's where you're like really in the heart of Pikes Peak, where you've got the huge drop-offs that you're contending with. And you know what my secret is for that? Don't look at them, like never. Like, I look at it when I'm looking at a video, but when I'm driving, I focus on the road. I imagine there's 500 feet of runoff in every direction, and I just focus on the road and just try and drive it as well as I can. Heading through Elk Meadow now, this is another great little corner combo, and normally you'd be just fighting oversteer on the way out and just trying to put power down as you row through the gears, and then just going up to the next hairpin, jam on the brakes, down there, and always trying to carry good entry speed into those hairpins, and using the hill where the front end's just gonna bite and dig. And we used a big 305, very gummy tire all the way around on the car, and you could really just kind of shove it into those hairpins, carrying a ton of trail brake in there, carrying the brakes right in there, and then boom, right on the gas and straighten the hands right away, and the thing would just launch out of the corners. And so I'm trying to do that now and carry momentum as I go through the different hairpins. And because the average speed is lower here, and obviously also the altitude is getting higher, the airflow in the W's is the worst. So this is where you hurt motors most on Pikes Peak. Once you get up on the top above Devils, then you're up to speed again and you're getting some airflow, even though the air again is getting thinner. At least you have some airflow. Here you're going down to zero, and almost like the hairpins are 35 miles an hour, and then punching up to 100, and then back down to 35 again. So that's really hard on the engine, and so I was doing a lot of management here as I'm getting to the top of the W's, the last two, and I love the crowd up there that's always peering over the edge at Devil's Playground into the last couple W's. What an iconic view of Pikes Peak there, and then coming up through Devil's Playground, you're like, all right, now we've got the average speed, we can take it up again, and the whole time going, this engine could lock up at any moment, but I'm gonna keep on going because I'm gonna try and get this thing to the top. And now I've been driving most of the drive now, just managing temperatures. And again, this is not an uncommon thing in Pikes Peak. Most engines, even the electric cars, struggle as they get up to altitude. The cumulative effect of all this uphill high load driving and very little cooling. Yeah, even electric cars need cooling, right? For their different cooling systems they have for the motor and the battery. So for everything, they struggle up here. And in this case, I've been dealing with this for a long time, and now I'm ripping through the quick sections up on the top of the mountain, and man, it's just, to me, the top of the mountain is Pikes Peak. It's something about being above timberline and having that really flowing high speed stuff where your average speed in the W's, as I said, is very low, and now your average speed is over 100 miles an hour as you're rolling through, and many of these corners are 120 miles an hour, scored up to 140, back down to 80, up to 120, and what's the other thing that we have to deal with on the top? The bumps. And we're kind of coming up to that because we're about to head into Boulder Park, and that's, besides the bump that's right at Glen Cove, there's also a bump at the entry to Bottomless Pit. Once you get into Boulder Park, that's where the bumps really start. All the repaving, all the frost heaves. And it's not like the repaving job wasn't good, it was just like, those are areas that get heaves anyway. So they repaved it and it was smooth. The next year the heaves are back in the repaving. And so now you're definitely dealing with, on a downforce car, your ride height changing, which is changing your downforce. We need that travel. We're trying to have a good platform in the car so you can maintain really good speed. and carry speed through these sections. And the trick for bumps is don't try and turn on the bumps. You want to turn, go straight across the bump, then turn again. And if you do that, you're kind of releasing the lateral load and you're decreasing the risk of the car snapping sideways on you from the bump. And you can handle a little bit of wheel spin in a straight line, but you don't want it when you're going sideways, especially at 120 miles an hour across the bump. So that's kind of the technique to use. And so now I'm in the cog cut. I'm so close to the finish and I'm like, I got this. This is good. You know, this isn't terrible. Like, I've been able to maintain pretty good speed through here. And then I come up to the braking zone at Olympic Corner and I'm accelerating across the bumps, and then I'm approaching the braking zone. I jump on the brakes and I start blipping and downshifting, you know, normal heel and toe, and the engine locks up and dies. And as soon as I let it out in first gear, the engine's just locked solid. And so I'm sitting on Olympic Corner going, what do I do now? I mean, so of course, what do? Clutch in, starter button. Starter won't turn, engine's locked up. Try it again, cycle ignition. I'm just trying everything. It's a locked engine, none of that is gonna help. But what I figure out is put it in reverse. So I stick the car in reverse and I can't see behind me, and I just let the car pop start in reverse, jump start, and I take off and it's running. Some miracle has occurred and the car is now running. And I drive it up across the line and I'm just like, what just happened? Because if you look at that Olympic Corner from the finish line, it's about 200 or 300 yards, maybe maximum. And so the thought of me being stuck on Olympic Corner causing a red flag was just, I was heartbroken at the time. And then the moment I threw it in reverse and felt the engine actually turn over and fire, it was like, game on, let's do this. So I went ripping across the line, and I didn't know how long I had been sitting there. It turns out it was about 30 seconds. We timed it later. And so that, of course, kind of wrecked our run a little bit. But I'd been managing it the whole way up, and that meant we probably were going to do like a 9:45-ish or something like that. We ended up doing a 10:17, and with a great run, with that engine not overheating from the picnic grounds all the way at the bottom, NV8, who knows how fast it could have gone. But we're going to come and try it again, and we're going to find out how fast it is. So I want to thank you for watching this episode of Mastering the Mountain. 2017 was, as you could probably tell, was one there's a lot of emotions involved in that run. It's just such a great event, and I can't say enough nice things about the Pikes Peak organization and everyone involved. And I just love coming out and doing it, and I can't wait to do it again. And of course, shameless plug, Optimum Drive is my book where I talk about a lot of the techniques of driving, and you heard me kind of talk about little bits and pieces of there. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, go find theoptimumdrive.com, which is my website, or the book Optimum Drive you can find on Amazon. And thanks again for coming and spending some time with me on Mastering the Mountain, and hopefully we'll get to do this again in the year coming up.